Hey, it looks like we are live. Thank you to Catastrophic Theater for continuing these virtual talkbacks, these sort of happy hour chats. And I'm Rob Shimko. I'm the Catastrophic Theater's dramaturg, and I'll be fielding questions. Shannon, am I going to see them in this chat?
You know what? I just realized something. The chat, I need to enable the chat. So just give me 1 second. Let me work on that.
Okay, so chat is being enabled, and that's how we will see questions from the audience. But we can't see everybody's faces, but I can see the faces of the cast. And this is a little reunion for the team that made Tragedy a Tragedy come to life for Catastrophic Theater. And we're here to just sort of have a little informal talk about the video that we imagine you watched, or maybe you also, we hope, also saw the live version. Play that takes on new resonances every time the world changes, and some other new tragedy enters our consciousness. So let's talk a little bit, as we usually do for the beginning of these, a little bit about why this play for the Catastrophic Theater. And Tamara, I like to ask you this question first always. So certainly not the first Will Eno play that Catastrophic Theater has done. And obviously the theater has great affinity for Will's work. But do you want to talk a little bit about this play, or also maybe a little bit about what Will Eno means to the Catastrophic Theater?
Sure. We're big, huge Will Eno fans, actually. And it's just been one of those things where his plays have just sort of fallen into our laps, and we've felt compelled immediately to usually produce them. We have done Tom Paine, Middletown. At this play, Tragedy came about on our programming in the last season because of, we had just seen Wakey Wakey. We'd had a wonderful production that was co-produced with U of H School of Theater of Dance and Hyde Park Theater from Austin, and Catastrophic bringing Hyde Park's wonderful production to U of H. And Jason and I were in the middle of planning the season, and we were like, wait, we got to get back to Will Eno again. We got to get back to him. We're also super vibing on him because he was in person for that whole week, hanging out at U of H and doing things with your students, actually, Rob. And we were lucky enough to attend some fun cocktail parties and go to some dinners and really get to actually just hang out with him, which was lovely. He is totally eccentric, but lovely and charming, and just very real person. So that was our inspiration. We grabbed sort of, I think actually I grabbed this book off of my shelf, and it's a compilation of some of his other plays, and we jumped on Tragedy a Tragedy. It hasn't been produced as much, and it was his first play, but it just felt really relevant at the time. It felt so catastrophic as well. It's such a classic absurdist piece. And I knew that we had a great cast to bring it to life too. So that's how we first ended up with it in the season. I would say now the reason that people are watching it is when we were going through, once again, our list of productions that we would be hopefully able to share through streaming with a larger audience, which has been great, as people that don't live here have been able to see our work, which is wonderful. This one jumped out, and several people also mentioned, this one seems really pertinent right now. This play about people, perhaps reporters, sort of representing everyone, covering a tragic crisis with no real understanding of it, and you can't see it, but something is happening. And so obviously with the coronavirus, it seemed to take on, like you had sort of hinted, another sort of a meaning for now.
Wait, what? Oh my God, you're right.
Well, yeah, I mean, with that in mind, something clearly has changed the world since the play was done. And they have me on here to ask the obvious questions. But and Greg, I don't know if you want to go first, but maybe we could ask the cast to reflect a little bit on what the play means now, as opposed, because I remember us talking about hurricanes a lot
Mhm.
Yeah.
during rehearsing, and talking about this sort of, well, like an ongoing tragedy where people are on the news and broadcasting. Our touch point at the time, which seems both not very long ago and so long ago, was was Hurricane Harvey.
Mhm.
God, remember hurricanes? I miss those.
Don't, Greg, shush. No.
Well, by comparison, you know. Yeah, this watching it again, like once it was available to see online, I had never seen it before. And because we were all facing forward, I had very little idea what the show actually looked like. So I got to see what everybody was doing for the very first time. And, you know, sort of on this like out of control car down a mine shaft of disasters that keep happening. And you can't keep up with it. It's like I never know what I'm going to wake up and see when I look at my phone. It's like, oh God, do I do this now or put it off and watch Dumb and Dumber or The Simpsons or something? Yeah, and yeah, it's like trying to make sense of this idiotic situation we're living through, and very little information is coming from our leaders that seems relevant or even relevant, accurate, or honest. I mean, what do you do in a 24-hour news cycle like this? What do you do? I think you like these guys. They're the band on the Titanic, playing while the ship goes down. They're doing their jobs, and I read some books once. I think it was William H. Macy talking about like
How to get your kid into
being
college?
I beg your pardon?
How to get your kid into college?
No, not that one. That was before.
Oh,
I prefer his earlier stuff. But yeah, he was talking about somebody asking him to cry on camera, and he said, "Yeah, I can do that, but isn't it better if I just try to do my job really hard? And if I cry, then I do." But it's a bunch of people that are approaching this thing that makes no sense, this swirling chaos, and they're using tools that maybe aren't the best for what's going on. But they're the tools they have. It's the thing that you said, Rob, in our first rehearsal. It's these people approaching the situation and dealing with it through a very special aperture that news people commenting on something where there's no news. It's just like constant chaos and or no information at all or something like that. Trying to make sense of something that is senseless. And it feels way more like that than it did when we were just worried about hurricanes.
It really does. I'm reminded, Tamara used the word absurdist, and I'm reminded of a class I took in graduate school where we were looking at the Eastern European writers of the 50s and 60s that got called absurdists by more sort of Western European and American critics. And the observation was we're not really going for absurdism. People are always listening on our calls, so we talk in elliptical ways because we're being observed. Our plays are strange because our lives are strange. And as our lives become stranger and stranger in 2020, the interesting thing about the style that we call absurdism is how it creeps closer and closer to the style that we've called realism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and something else about the Eastern Europeans that I've always I realized that I would never be an Eastern European director like Liviu Ciuli or Andrei Serban, because they couldn't talk about what they were talking about. They had to develop metaphors to talk about what they were talking about, so that they couldn't, they had plausible deniability, and I think that's another big thing in absurdism. If they talked about what they were talking about directly, then they'd be arrested and mysteriously vanish. And that, as a director, that gave me a little bit of a reprieve. I said, like, I don't have to make plays as good as that. But now we're moving into a world where you almost, God, you know what? I'm not even going to go there. I'm saying, like, we could be like Eastern Europeans too soon.
You're going into the designated mourner now, Greg.
I know.
I was going to say.
Oh, go ahead.
Will, we talked about this when we were doing the play, that he does seem to be like a modern absurdist playwright, but that there's something very gentle and kind in all of his plays, which was something I really appreciated about this piece too, that even as it ended and, we're basically having the lovely Jaden tucking us all into our death, to bed tonight. But there was something so sweet and simple about it, that actually in some ways was comforting. So I do appreciate that about a lot of his plays, have that sort of warmth in them too, that is sometimes lacking in other great existential or absurdist pieces. You don't see that as much.
I agree with that 100%. My favorite parts of the play, my favorite part of the play was listening to the people trying to make Frank feel better.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do anything except listen to people who felt sorry for me, and it felt so nice. These small human gestures, like in the middle of all the, wordplay and clever twists on hackneyed phrases, and the actual gentle, reaching out, holding someone's hand that might need some hand holding in that moment. Is present in all of his work, and I don't think I'm not revealing any secrets when I say that. But Middletown was like that too, because there was a thing that, like in the first act, everyone was called policeman or whatever, and no one's names were mentioned. Then Act 2, people are saying things like, "Oh, Susan, I was so sorry to hear about your mom. How are you doing?" All of a sudden, like out of nowhere, after intermission, they're calling each other by their first names and saying, like, "Hey, did you get that thing that I sent over that you really needed? Because I was worried about you." He's one of the loveliest writers in existence.
We have a question in the chat that I think is worth noting, because it's also going to bring us back to, in a way, I think everybody, at least among the news people, can speak to this. The news people from the cast, that the show was written pre 9/11, and that's true. And the question is about, well, so what if it's pre 9/11? What was the overarching theme then? And I think what it's getting at, and this is a thing that Will, talked about. I talked to him about it in an interview that we did. That he did not have, therefore, the constant news stream in mind, where you saw broadcasters on for days at a time, where people at Ground Zero were reporting for 48 hours straight without a break. And so without that in mind, what did he have in mind? And we'll see what we recall of this. But one thing that I recall Will saying is that this play was written very early in his life as a playwright. He was in his 20s. He was working very demanding hours and these tough jobs. And he talked about a job that he had, essentially cold calling for a kind of like almost like boiler room style, like Wall Street concern. He was doing really, really low rung like cold calling and just on the phone and talking incessantly all day, to when he would be utterly exhausted. And then he would write when he was utterly exhausted. And he started to write about being utterly exhausted. And so one of the interesting things was that it started to become about these newscasters, because that was a way of writing characters who had to keep talking and had to fill time because of this unnamed event of the sort of endless night. But I wonder if we can talk to more members of the cast about this experience of presenting a character who's not only very tired, but just they need to keep talking, and they need to keep talking. And so maybe we can hear from some of the cast about that. I don't know that I would call it an overarching theme so much as a human experience that was on Will's mind and in his body when he was writing.
Elizabeth?
Well, looking back at the person I was when we were doing this show to who I am now, I feel much more, I feel like I'm turning into Constance. I find myself talking about things just to be, it's rehashing what's going on in the world, continuing to talk about things and really feeling like, no, this could really be the end of the world, but we're going to keep doing all the things that we need to do. We're going to do our Zoom calls. We're going to send that email. Who knows if we're going to be here tomorrow or not? I don't know. It does in a lot of ways feel like end of days, and how relevant this play is just, to me, continues to grow. I mean, the fact that Will Eno wrote this before 9/11, I mean, the man is a freaking genius. And then just to see how it has sort of bubbled and just become more and more relevant as the decades have gone on, to me is just, it's pretty stunning in a great and terrifying way.
I think a lot of what was going through my head during the show, and a lot of my focus was on those feelings of isolation and being alone. I think my character was out in the woods and trying to do his job, but that isolation creeping in, and the effects of that, and being out there for so long with only the voice on the other end of the line to hold on to, permeated my thoughts and my ideas and my feelings during that show. And I think there's some sense of that too now, that everybody's going through isolation differently now. And whereas in the hurricane, which is, that's funny, Rob, that you mentioned that, because I forgot that was through the whole rehearsal process. We were talking about this in terms of, newscasters in the hurricane, and those were our reference points and touch points. Very different from what's happening now. But there's still an isolation now that is not really present in a hurricane. In a hurricane, everybody's going through the same thing, and people are kind of on the same page, and it's very much teamwork, pulled together. Everybody's electricity's out, and it's not isolating. You're cut off, but you're cut off from services and not each other. You're cut off from comforts, but everybody is very together. This is very different. What we're going through today. In the play, I felt like out in the woods, all alone, and Constance standing next to an empty house, watching it. And I'll say, Greg, you're right. It's kind of cool to get to see what everybody else is doing. But Elizabeth, you are so good seeing you standing out by the empty house. And I know we're talking, it's not absurd, but it's so ridiculous that you're standing next to an empty house talking about, I'm out. I just pictured just a random house. Like, you just walked up to, this siding looks good, and we're going to do it from here. But that feeling of isolation, I think, was very significant, and I had forgotten about that, so it's nice to revisit, kind of.
The prophetic thing, it's I've made jokes before that somebody needs to get a hold of Wally Shawn and tell him to quit writing plays or write some with a happy ending, because they keep coming true.
Yeah.
And, maybe Will could do the same, just take one for the team, write a play with a happy ending. Because, the Wallace Shawn plays again and again, they end up like coming true. And this one came true like long after he had written it.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
not get to the designated mourner yet. Not yet, Greg. Not yet.
No. I'm sorry. Yeah, hold off on that.
We have another interesting question in the chat, and please do. This is how we're going to get your questions. Please keep adding questions to the chat because they're great. This tracks us back a ways, and it has something to do with some of the stuff that Greg was saying about like European theater makers. But here's the chat. Any thoughts on whether the best works of art come out of those people working under oppressive regimes?
Ooh,
Like
look.
graffiti art, maybe.
Got
something that it's kind of weird asking like, well, what, like, is this best art? Like, is this art the best? And that's obviously subjective, but I think there is something to be said that really good pieces of art can come about from when people are feeling more restricted in their voice and in their opinions and the things that they want to say, be it under any like oppressive regime or any sort of oppressive nature. I think that any artist who wants to say something will say it despite their circumstances. And that's what I think about that. Muting myself.
Oh, I've been forgetting to mute myself. I apologize, everyone.
I'm not good at it. So I've just let you hear me like clear my throat and move around. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably, of course, great stuff can come out of that. I mean, it focuses on the urgency of what you are expressing, right? And art has always been, theater has always, with every revolution, there are great works of art that go with that actually bring the voice of revolution to life. So I'm hopeful that shifting to just right now, what's happening with us and having to sort of reinvent how we bring art to people in this crazy time, that it will be a motivator as well. And that some really powerful and creative and imaginative things will come out of this chaotic time.
I don't know if it's relevant, but I've been lucky enough to get to travel, and I will never forget. And whenever I feel bad or times are hard or whatever, I remember once I got to go to a vineyard. I'd never been to a wine vineyard before, and it was fantastic. It was out in the middle of the countryside and stuff. And the guy who's given us the tour, this old guy, I'll never forget. I was asking about the grapes. The plants are very small and the grapes are tiny. And I was like, wow, I really expected it to be big, like, rows of giant grapes. And he looked at me, and with a certain relish, he told me, to make the best wine, the vine must suffer. and he meant it from his soul, like they must suffer. And the wine was delicious, but I think about that all the time. That sometimes to make the best
have
wine.
Some more of my suffering wine right now.
There you go.
Cheers, everybody.
It suffered that much, but drink up.
Look at me, I'm so flushed. I've had half a glass of wine. I'm like red as a berry.
You look like we're hanging out at cons right now.
So we actually do. Sometimes this is also part of it. It's just it's Thursday before a holiday weekend, and life is very hard. And it's wonderful to spend time with actors and artists and directors and writers. And I'm gonna just mention flat out, there's nothing in the chat right now. So if people want to ask more questions, go right ahead. But I'm gonna fill this with a little question about revisiting a show in your memory. And so let me ask the cast, now that you've had time in between then and now, and maybe Jaden, I'll pick on you first only because we haven't heard from you yet. But what do you recall? And I'm also interested in what of the memory is the onstage stuff, what you did for the audience on stage, and what of it is the work, the 90% of the iceberg that is the rest of the work that goes into it. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting for this show in specific because I was just a little monologue basically at the end. So most of rehearsal and stuff, I got to watch everybody else kind of do their thing. And so when rewatching the show, it was just bizarre because the only thing I hadn't really watched was the stuff I had done, and everything else is exactly what I remembered. I mean, it was like Tuatsi, it was like everything from my memory, but was really, really similar. And so it was just interesting in that way. I mean, to just be, coming back and looking at a show that I haven't thought about in a second and like trying to, I don't know, remember even what you're going through those, during that period of time, whatever that kind of button of time was. I don't know, that's what I kind of thought was really interesting when I was kind of rethinking about, this play. Yeah.
Yeah. What else stands out in the memory for the rest of the cast?
For me, it was timing the interruptions correctly. And that's pretty much the main thing that I remember about it, except for when I got to go on for a longer than a couple of lines. That felt good. And but the main thing was like, okay, remember to stop talking at just the right time. It was stuff like that. That's a very, very tense memory for me. Cutting people off at just the right time and being cut off at just the right time. That's what I remember about it.
Well, and
Right, because it was more challenging because you weren't having direct conversation. Like you weren't.
Yeah.
You couldn't have the natural like back and forth as actors on those. You had to really, really be on top of your scripts.
Well, and that's what, Tamara, I was going to say something along those lines. I found myself listening more intently because I couldn't see people and just hearing everything that was going on. And even watching the streaming version, just waiting for those moments, and actually when that weird music would come up, just really listening to it. And I just remember listening like really deeply, and then having a blast backstage. So it was like this crazy, like we all hung out together, we were all connected, and then we come out, we've all got our little spots, but we're just connected through the sound versus being able to see each other.
Yeah, back just to tag along to what everyone's saying about having to speak into the abyss and not at each other, that was a real powerful feeling of ensemble, of being alone on stage with everyone, and we're all just looking out into nothing and knowing that everyone is looking out into nothing, and yet they were still there. It's a very cool thing.
Yeah, it's like I've done one-man show and it was fun, but it's more fun to look out into the abyss when there's a bunch of other people in the same play doing the same thing. Way more fun.
I think one of my favorite things when I watched the video again was were the very specific pauses where we really gave it the full minute of just sitting and waiting to listen to the recorded sound, or we'll be pausing right now and for this other announcement and get back to you. And I remember in rehearsal you guys were like, wait, are we really going to wait for a solid minute? And we made that decision to do so, and I think it's great. I think it plays so well in these moments against the rhythms of all of the words, to just suddenly have those moments of silence to really commit to them.
Yeah, and I almost, oh yeah, no, go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, it's your turn. You go.
No, I'll say something.
I'm sorry. We've got to go back to our national affiliate. No, all I was going to say was I love those things. When someone who lives on camera is off camera, I mean, that's what makes it superhuman. Is seeing all these people like what they do as soon as no one's watching them or they think no one's watching them.
And it's hard not to also mention that I love the words in the play. I love the script, and I already thought that everything he was saying was so poignant and sophisticated. But rewatching it now with this sense of doom all around us that's never ending, and all the things that he's saying, I'm just like, wow.
Yeah. Makes me want to ask, are the dogs okay?
Yeah.
The dogs there, are they doing what they do?
That's what I
Shaking
was
their
gonna say.
tails and other things the dogs do.
Oh yeah.
The writing's just amazing, It's just amazing, Yeah.
I'm so sorry I hit that horse with a rock.
Ah, man.
We have a new question in the chat, and it actually it ties back a little bit to what Greg was saying about news people and people who are on camera a lot. Were you, the cast, channeling any specific news people in your performances? And I'll add the additional question: if you weren't necessarily trying to channel or do a riff on a particular news person, did you at least have frame of reference news people that came to mind?
Greg?
One of my favorite movies of all time is Network, and Bryan Cranston already did this stage play, so this is as close as I'm ever going to come to getting to play Howard Beale. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. I watched a lot of, I think the Google search was local anchormen breaking down, and none of them matched Network. The late, great Peter Finch is Howard Beale. I mean, that's something I keep going back to. And now that my hair is solidly gray, that was the thing too. I read this play like so many years ago and said, I got to play Frank someday, but no one will do this play. And so I set it the back row of my bookshelf behind the first row of books, and thought I'd never have to get that out again. But yeah, it was that, but then all the newscasters who break down and go, they're live and they start effing and jeffing about something, it's also fun to watch dignified people slip on a banana peel and start cussing about it, And I think that's why the play ends up being funny, is because these people are, trying to maintain professionalism and dignity and talking about, all the stuff that John says, where he starts talking like his mother and worries that he sounds like his mother. Or repeat, all the things that we all did in the play, where like we've run out of professional tricks, and it's, the dumb person underneath is revealed. And I think that's some of the most hilarious and poignant things. I don't remember who said it, but I read once in a book by someone who's real smart. They said the funniest thing in the world is seeing a man in a tuxedo and a top hat slip on a banana peel. And it kind of is, it's the root of comedy is, the world being turned upside down, or, stimulus and response not quite matching up.
Did anyone else specifically have someone in mind as your reporter?
I watched a lot of like Jon Stewart old clips and Rob Corddry, and you know, in South Park they always make fun of the news and people just reporting something absurd with a straight face. And what was the other? Ted Cruz, right? Who did the filibuster or something with
Yeah, green eggs and ham.
Green eggs and ham. Yeah, you know, something. You know, some senator reading this children's book for. You know, so.
Governor, he gone. Ain't gonna be no moon no more.
So yeah, and you know, local and remembering stuff from Harvey, obviously. So it's a mixture of silly straight face and then just I can't go on, I must go on, or what's that? Whatever that.
Yeah. I can't go on. I must go on.
Yeah.
The quintessential Beckett quote, right? This idea that there's this paradoxical experience of I literally am at the end of my rope, and yet in this case, I have to keep talking.
Yeah, that very much mirrors how I feel a lot these days.
Yeah, when the rule is you can't stop talking, and the situation is you can't solve it and you can't answer it. This play, like watching it, I felt great exhilaration watching our production, and also a whole lot of tension in my body because of that. You know, I can't go on, I'll go on. And it's like, I can't go on. And I did one of those things, you know?
Then there's Jaden, of course, who was not a reporter, who was our witness.
Yeah.
And I was really, it didn't, you know, the script did not specify that the witness was to be a young man, just was sort of the idea of every man. But I think there was something extra special by having you in that role. You really were, I know you're not that innocent in real life, but but you brought something just so like this sort of hope in like the youth, you know, this very innocent and youthful quality to you that was out there as everything was ending. It was like the juxtaposition of death and life, so clearly life coming at you. So very happy that we went that direction, Mr. Key.
Me too.
I can think of somebody else who's happy about it.
Brian's muted laugh.
Well, I didn't want to cackle in everyone's ear. Whatever, Jaden.
But yeah, the writing in the play is amazing. I love the writing.
Magical evening.
It really is.
Well, I fell in love with the script.
Oh, Lord.
Oh my God. This is like when they run out of steam on the commentary track.
Yeah. We have to keep going for another 22 minutes.
But this is when it's going to get really good.
This is when the true fans are sticking around asking questions.
Yeah.
It's just shame.
So yeah, so right now, I think
everyone else is logged off.
We Shayna, I don't know if you want to maybe put something in the chat, but we have answered the audience questions. We're 40 minutes in. We want to make sure that we are responsive to what the audience wants to, and then we get Shayna she gone, paraphrasing the play in our chat, being even funnier. Is there anything else that people want to talk about, or anything else that the cast wants to bring up? We're 40 minutes in. There's no carved in stone starting or stopping time.
Okay, if nobody's saying anything right now, I want to say I really miss you guys, and I miss doing this play with you. I mean, and that's like from the deepest depth of my cold little heart, which is actually filled with love, and I don't really express it enough. So you guys, this was one of the best things I've been involved with. Thank you.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah.
I think that it translates really well to the video as well.
Yeah.
Great.
You lose something anytime that you are capturing live theater in more of an archival recording. We didn't go in and obviously do multiple days of filming this from different angles, as though we were making a film. So this was just the brilliant George and Kay Parker with help me right now, I'm forgetting the name of the company, Full Media Jacket, that not only do they make our promotional videos, but they do all of our archive documentation as well. And I just felt like the isolation between the actors on stage really, really worked in this film version. In some ways, even better an effect of that on film. When you're sitting in the audience at Match, when we did the play, I mean, yes, I could obviously see a little bit of a light bleed between people here or there. But in this video, it really does, just the darkness surrounds you. The night completely surrounds you. And I thought that really helped in this video format. And then I guess maybe because it is so much direct address and isolated, that it also lent itself well to translating to film. Do you guys feel the same way? That it was a good...
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Absolutely. I loved watching it.
It's not true for everything that we do. I mean, live theater is sometimes really hard to take that way. Sometimes they can become so flat when you see them in video. So a lot of that is the performances, a lot of that is the writing. And then I have to just once again give the shout out to George and Kay because they did a great job.
And I'll back what Elizabeth said earlier too. I mean, behind, what we'd be on stage and having a great time, but backstage, I felt like we were having such a good time too. And this is like one of the most, I mean, it really was. It was like every day I was just excited for the conversations I was going to have with everybody. And like that, whatever hour before that turned into 30 minutes, that time, I can't forget that.
One of the most fun weeks was when you took over the Snapchat for or the Instagram for Catastrophic.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was just fun to be. It really was. It felt like everybody was like super supportive of everything. And I don't, you don't always feel that such immense positive, attitude or energy with everybody a lot of times. And I felt like that's how it was with Tragedy for sure.
Well, and it was weird for me because I was the only one in my dressing room. So you guys were great because I would like come waddling down, like, what are you guys doing? And you guys would come visit. So that to me was just a highlight, was just getting to hang out with all of you guys. And I miss you all so much.
Yeah, I miss you all too. I miss this show a lot. I found myself since the show closed. Okay, I'll just start saying the first monologue. It's still in my brain. And I'll just go, it's Michael here.
I keep saying you might be going to be fine.
One of the great lines, one of the very great lines. You might be going to be.
Oh, and of course we have to point out that we'd already talked about, he wrote this in 2001, and this governor character, right? That was sort of the elected official, and how I know when I read it, it just brought to mind our current man occupying the White House.
Very good.
And
Yeah.
but it's like it's becoming every day. It's even more, just the crazy letters from the governor.
And our current governor brings to mind the governor from The Walking Dead, right? I'm watching a Charles Dickens adaptation right now when he, from 25 years ago, and the governor was playing the murderous school teacher. And he's such a good actor, but it made me think about governors just because of all that.
I don't know, he'd be The Walking Dead, but.
Oh, hey, yeah. Bazinga.
And the police are pulling up at my house.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are at the 45-minute mark, and we've had our love fest. It must be said, and how deeply we miss making theater together, how much we miss one another, and how much we miss this play. I want to thank everybody from the cast and Tamara and this great, amazing group, and thank you to everybody who watched and who added questions to the chat. We spent a really lovely 45 minutes going down memory lane and also thinking a little bit more about the play, and that's really worth something. So thank you all. We appreciate your time, and thank you for your your support of the Catastrophic Theater as always.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank
Love
you.
guys.
Thank you. It was great seeing you guys. No
What?
doubt.
How long is the show up till? July 19th.
No, it is
Yes.
yes.
July
Okay.
July
19th.
19th.
Who is
the
that?
19th. It is the 19th. Okay.
Thank
Cool.
you. Thank you
That's
for
right, a
asking.
month. It's a month. A month. A month. of
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
A month.
Right. So yeah, there's still time to check it out.
Cool.
Yeah, because if you tuned into this without seeing the show, you might be a little, bewildered.
Okay, we will end the stream now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the
Thank
next
you.
one.
Much love.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, dudes.
Oh, shit. I see my friends disappearing one by one.